Hello everyone, I hope you are all doing well. In today's video, I would like to show you all the tools that I use in my different phases of sewing journey. There will be 4 parts. I call them starter pack, essentials, nice to have, and not necessary. I bought my sewing machine back in February 2020 to shorten my pants and sew some grocery shopping bags. Then I discovered sewing patterns and also the joy of making my own clothes. I did a lot of research before buying those items, so I hope this will also help you in your sewing journey. First thing on the list, the starter pack. The first item shouldn't come as a surprise, it's the sewing machine. This sewing machine is Elna Explorer 150. I didn't buy the most expensive one, of course. After doing a lot of research, I think this one is one of the best value for money that you can find in the market. It has the essential features for beginners, for example, straight lines, zigzag, but also buttonholes. Second item on the list is the thread. When I bought the sewing machine, I heard a lot that you cannot just buy the cheapest and random thread because it might damage, even break your sewing machine. So I did some research and found one of the brands called Gütermann. So Gütermann, I think this is a German thread brand, and they have a lot of different categories depending on your projects. You have threads in cotton, polyester, or even silk, and they're also available in any colors that you need. The last item here is a pair of scissors. So when you just start sewing, you don't need the most expensive one, of course, so you just need a random pair of scissors that you have available at home. So now you know how to use your own sewing machine, you did some small projects, and you cannot wait to make your own clothes. Now I'm going to present you the tools that I use all the time during my sewing projects. We are going to start with the pins and clips. Of course, the pins, you're going to need them when you're pinning the pattern to the fabric, but also when you're sewing the fabrics together. And then clips. I think they're so important depending on the material, because sometimes you really don't want to harm the delicate tissues, so it's better to clip them instead of pinning them, of course. Then the safety pins, they're always important when you're sewing the straps and turning them inside out, or for the belts, so I find them very useful in the sewing projects. Then of course you will need a measuring tape to make sure everything is in the right size. For your sewing machine, you always have a top thread and bobbin. So the more project you're doing, you'll realize you have a lot of threads and you need more bobbin for that. Here it's important to buy more empty bobbins so that you will have the opportunity to use the different color of threads that you have, and you realize there are a lot of bobbins and it's a lot of messy. So here, this is quite useful. A little box. It's special for making bobbins inside, so I really suggest you have one. At the beginning, when I start sewing, I didn't pay much attention. I had one needle in my machine and I did a lot of projects with that. And soon I realized that some fabrics, they're not doing really well. The problem was the needle. So here I have now different types of needles. We have the tiny ones for silks or viscose. We have also a bigger one for cottons or jeans. It's important to have more spare needles at home because it's recommended to change the needles regularly, and also sometimes the needles breaks while sewing. You will also need hand sewing needles to sew the buttons and also some interior hand sewing finishing touches. So that one random pair of scissors is not enough anymore. I use one pair of scissors to cut the paper and the patterns, and then I have the second pair of scissors for the fabric. It's really important to remember that this pair of scissors is only for the fabrics. Never use this one to cut the paper, pattern, or plastics. I also have a cutter. It's extremely useful when the fabric is thin and fluid. And if you don't want to hurt your table, you might need a cutting board like this. Last but not least, you might need a tiny embroidery scissor like this to trim the remaining threads, but also cut open the buttonholes. Every time when you finish a sewing project, don't forget to clean your sewing machine and the overlock machine with a pair of makeup brush. You will need different rulers when you start tracing the pattern. So we have here straight ones in different size. We have a one for the curves, but also here we have a tiny little guy. I use it quite often when I'm tracing and ironing the hem. When I bought my sewing machine, there were already some tools in the pack. For instance here, this fit is for buttonholes. This one is for invisible zipper. This one is the seam ripper. Actually, it's normal to make mistakes, even when you're experienced. For instance, I sew the right sleeves to the left side or something inside out. So the seam ripper will help you save a lot of time to undo the process. While sewing, there are a lot of important marks in the pattern that you need to transfer them to the fabric. So you will need a specific pen for that. So here we have self-erasable pens, so they will disappear within a few minutes. And we have also those types of pen that can be washed off by water simply. When you finish a project, of course, you don't want to throw away the pattern, you want to keep it for the future projects. So here, I think the most useful method to keep the pattern is to put them in this file organizer like this, so that it's neatly organized in your bookshelf or in the boxes. When you buy a pattern, it's always recommended to trace the right size that you want instead of cut directly in the pattern, because maybe in the future you might need a different size for your friends, families, or even you might need yourself a different size in the future. Personally, I use tissue paper to trace the patterns. I recently discovered a quicker and a more efficient method to transfer the lines to the fabric is to use a tracing wheel and a carbon paper. So you can trace some lines that's not visible in the finishing product. I can't stress enough the importance of ironing during the whole sewing process. You have to iron the fabric before cutting it. You also have to iron out the seam after each step of sewing. This one is an overlock machine or a serger. It will give you cleaner finishes inside of a clothes, but it will also stable the seams and make the clothes that you made more durable. Here are a few tools which are not necessary but nice to have. This pair of scissors, called pinking scissors. So when you cut the fabric, it won't leave a straight edge. Instead, it will be a zigzag edge. This kind of edge will stop the fabric from fraying easily. This is a magnet bracelet. It's very useful when you have pins all around on the table, on the floor, and you want to pick them quickly. It's very efficient. I have already showed you carbon paper or like special pens to trace on the fabric, but we can also use this kind of tailor's chalk for some specific types of fabric that we cannot use those pens. I bought this one specifically for our next project, which is a suit for my boyfriend. This is a tailor's hem. I bought this one recently so that I can iron out easily the small details like cuffs and curves. It's really nice to have this kind of adjustable sewing mannequin so that in each type of sewing process you can make sure that they're on the right size. I also use this to change the pattern to my size, draft a new pattern. It will really save you a lot of time. Among all the sewing tools that I bought, there are a few left unused, so for me personally, they're not necessary. I already showed you the small clips that I use all the time, but there are also the bigger ones that I bought. They're like so bulky, I don't know why I would use them. This tiny mini iron, isn't it cute? At first, I thought I would use it for the smaller details, but it doesn't heat up really well, and the cable is also very short, so I end up just using the bigger regular iron. Here's another tailor's chalk. When I bought it, I realized that there is a wheel on it and it will actually scratch the fabric and it doesn't really leave any marks actually. So that is the full overview of my sewing tools. I hope you found it useful. There will be links of the items in the description box below. I will see you guys in the next video.